Hey everybody, and welcome back. It's great to see you all again. Um, so today we are going to be doing chapter 10 of McCaffrey's Dragonsong. I'm going to do my best to complete the entire chapter today, but it might be an extra long video since this chapter is about 22 pages long. That happens. I did this earlier and my bookmark decided to go whew, and I no idea where it landed. It just sort of went flying off into the background. Um, I know I put out a separate video, but if you didn't watch it, I just want to let you know. I know I've been promoting Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator and how excited I was to start it, and I started it. I started recording. I recorded 3 chapters. And I was getting a little iffy on if I was going to post it or not. Some of the language was not good. Just the viewpoints were really, really bad. And I thought about it. And I went, well, I'll read chapter 4. We'll see. We'll keep going and see if it gets a little bit better. Maybe it's just a few terms that I need to adjust so they don't sound so bad. I would have had to completely skip chapter 4. It was absolutely disgusting. And I cannot record that. I'm sorry. The book has been put away. I am now personally reading the BFG. So far, I'm up to chapter 6. I know they're short chapters, but I really haven't had a whole lot of time. And I haven't found any big issues with it. However, I'm going to readily admit, I actually miss quite a bit when I'm just reading a book. I've caught so much more in my reading of, well, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, things that that I don't remember seeing before. Doing this book, I'm loving this book, but I didn't realize how much I really disliked her parents. Um, and even starting the Zant series, which I know I haven't recorded chapter 2 yet. It's huge. I think it's like 40 something pages for chapter 2. And I, I, I don't know where to cut off. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure it out. And I know I can't do all of chapter 2 in one recording. It's huge. Um, okay. Now I'm doing a lot of talking here. I think I'm might be procrastinating because I know this is going to be a long chapter. Got my caffeine with me. I got some water with me. I got a kitty cat sleeping at my toes, and another one pittering around the area. So we'll figure it out. Let's get to reading. Chapter 10 of McCaffrey's Dragonsong. Chapter 10. Then my feet took off and my legs went too, so my body was obliged to follow. Me with my hands and my mouth full of cress, and my throat too dry to swallow. When mentally roused, she was in a quite dark place, and something crooned comfortably in her ear. She knew it was Beauty, but she wondered how she could be so warm all over. She moved, and her feet felt big, stuffed, and very sore. She must have made some sound because she heard a soft movement, and then the glow in the corner of the room was half unshielded. Are you uncomfortable? Are your feet painful? The warmth beside Melanie's ear disappeared. Clever beauty, Manoli thought with her approval after an instant's fear of discovery. Someone was bending over Melanie now, securing the sleeping furs about her shoulders. Someone whose hands were gentle, soothing, who smelled of clean herbs and faintly of numbweed. They only hurt a little, Menali replied untruthfully, because her feet had taken to throbbing so hard she was afraid the woman could hear them. Her soft murmur and her gentle hands denied Melanie's stoicism. You must surely be hungry. You've slept all day. I have? We gave you Fellis juice. You'd run your feet to ribbons. There was a slight hesitation in the woman's voice. They'll be fine in a 7-day. No serious cuts. The quiet voice held a ripple of amusement. DeGran is convinced you're the fastest runner in Pern. I'm not a runner. I'm just a girl. Not just a girl. I'll get you something to eat, and then it's best if you sleep again. Alone, Melanie tried not to think of her throbbing feet and a body which felt stone heavy, immobile. She was worried for fear Beauty or some of the others would come and be discovered by the werewoman. And what would happen to Lazy with no one to make him hunt for himself? And I'm Manara, the woman said as she returned with a bowl of steaming stew and a mug. You realize that you're at Brendan Ware? Good. You may stay here, as long as you wish. I can? A relief as intense as the pain in her feet flooded Melanie. Yes, you can. And the firmness of that reply made the right inalienable. Melanie is my name, she hesitated because Menora was nodding. How did you know? Menora motioned for her to continue eating. I've seen you at Half Circle, and the Harper asked the wing leader to keep search for you after you disappeared. We won't discuss that now, Melanie, but I assure you that you can stay at Brendan. Please don't tell them. As you wish. Finish your stew and take all of the drink. You must sleep to heal. She left as noiselessly as she came, but Melanie was reassured. Manora was the head woman at Brandon Ware, and what she said was so. The stew was delicious, thick with meat chunks and satisfying with herb flavors. She'd almost finished it when she heard a faint rustle, and Beauty returned, piteously broadcasting her hunger. With a sigh, Melanie pushed the bowl under the little queen's nose. Beauty licked it dry, then hummed softly and rubbed her face against Melanie's cheek. Where are the others? Melanie asked worriedly. The little queen gave another hum and began to curl herself up in a ball by Melanie's shoulder. She wouldn't have been so relaxed if the others were in trouble, Melanie thought, as she sipped the fellow's juice. Beauty, Melanie whispered, nudging the queen. If anyone comes, you go. You mustn't be seen here. Do you understand? The queen rustled her wings irritably. Beauty, you mustn't be seen. Melanie spoke as sternly as she could, and the queen opened one eye, which whirled slowly. Oh dear, won't you understand? The queen gave a soft, reassuring croon, and then closed both lids. The fellow's juice was already melting Melanie's limbs into weightlessness. The dreadful throb of her feet eased as her eyes relentlessly closed. Melanie had one last thought. How had Beauty known where she was? When Melanie woke, it was to hear faint sounds of children laughing, an infectious laughter that made her grin and wonder what caused such happiness. Beauty was gone, but the space where she had lain by Melanie's head was warm to the touch. The curtain across the cubicle parted, and a figure was silhouetted against the light beyond. What's the matter with you all of a sudden, Repa? The girl said softly to someone Melanie couldn't see. Oh, all right. I'm well rid of you for now. She turned and saw Melanie looking at her. How do you feel today? As she adjusted the globe for full light, Melanie saw a girl about her own age, dark hair tied primly black, from a face that was sad, tired, and oddly mature. Then she smiled, and the impression of maturity dissolved. Did you really run across Narat? I really didn't, although my feet feel as if they had. Imagine that, and you hold bread and oat during a fall. There was a grudging respect in her voice. I was running for shelter, Melanie felt obligated to say. Speaking of running, Manra couldn't come to see you herself right now, so you're in my charge. She told me exactly what to do. And the girl grimaced with such feeling that Melanie had a swift vision of Manra delivering her precise and careful instructions. And I've had a lot of experience. An expression of pain and anxiety crossed her face. Are you Manra's fosterling? Asked Melanie politely. An expression deepened for a moment, and then the girl erased all expression from her face, drawing her shoulders up with pride. No, I'm Bracky's. My name is Miriam. I used to be in the Southern Wear. She made the statement as that should make all the plain to Melanie. You mean in the southern continent? Yes. And Miriam sounded irritated. I didn't know anyone lived there. The words were no sooner out of her mouth than Melanie remembered some snippet of information overheard in conversation between Pateron and her father. Where have you been all your life? Demanded Miriam, exasperated. In half-circle sea-hold, Melanie replied meekly, because she didn't wish to offend the girl. Miriam stared at her. Haven't you ever heard of it? It was Melanie's turn to be condescending. "We have the biggest stock cavern in Pern." Miriam caught her eye, and both the girls began to laugh. The moment in which their friendship began. "Look, let me help you to the necessary. You must be bursting." And Miriam briskly threw back the sleeping fur. "You just lean on me." Melanie had to, because her feet were incredibly sore, even with Miriam supporting most of her weight. Fortunately, the necessary was no more than a few steps beyond the sleeping cubicle. By the time Melanie crawled back into her bed, she was shaking all over. "Stay on your stomach, Melanie. It'll be easier to change your bandages," Miriam said. "I haven't had to do many feet, it's true, but if you don't have to see what's going on, it makes it easier. Everyone at Southern said my hands are gentle, and I'll drown your feet in numbweed. Or would you want some more Phileas juice? Menora said you could." Melanie shook her head. "Brecky," and here Miriam's voice faltered briefly. "Brecky taught me how to change sticky bandages because Oh, dearie me, your feet look just like raw meat." "Oops, that's not the right thing to say." "But they do." "They will be all right," Menora said, and there was such confidence in the statement that Melanie preferred to believe it too. "Now, thread score. That's nasty. You've just lost all the skin on your feet. That's all. But I expect you to feel that's quite enough. Sorry, caught you there. Anyway, you'll not even have scars once the new skin grows. And it's really amazing how quickly skin does grow. Or so I've observed. Now, thread score. That's nasty for healing. Never quite fades. Lucky for you, Tigrans Branneth spotted you running. Dragons are very long-sighted, you know. There. Now, this should help." Melanie gasped involuntarily as Miriam slathered cool numbweed on her right foot. She'd been biting her lips against the pain while Miriam was with very gentle hands indeed, had removed the blood-caked bandages. But the relief from the pain was almost a shock. If she'd only lost the skin on her feet, why did they hurt so much more than her hand had? "Now we've only got the left foot to go. The numbweed does help, doesn't it? Did you ever have to boil it?" Miriam asked with a groan, and as usual didn't wait for an answer. "For 3 days I just grit my teeth and close my nose and firmly remind myself that it would be much worse if we didn't have numbweed. I suppose that's the bad with the good Menora's always saying we have to have. But you'll be relieved to know that there's no sign of infection." "Infection?" Melanie jerked herself up on her elbows, craning her head about. "Will you keep still?" Miriam glared so authoritatively that Melanie forced herself to relax. all she could see of her feet were slab-smeared heels. And you're very, very lucky there isn't any infection. After all, you'd been running shoeless over sand, dirt, and goodness knows what. It took us forever to wash the grit off. Miriam made a sympathetic sound. Just as well we dosed you good. You're sure there's no infection this time? This time? You haven't done this before, have you? Miriam's voice was shocked. No, not my feet. My hand. And Melanie turned on her side, holding out her scarred hand. She was considerably gratified by the concerned pity in Miriam's face as she examined the wound. However did you do that? I was gutting Packtail and the knife slipped. You were lucky to miss the tendons. Miss? Well, you are using those fingers. A bit drawn, that scar, though. Miriam clicked her tongue with professional dismay. Don't think much of your holds nursing, if that's any sample. Packtail slime is difficult, as bad as thread score in its own way, Melanie muttered, perversely defending her hold. Be that as it may, Miriam gave the foot bandage a final twitch. We'll see you don't have any such trouble with your feet. Now, I will bring you something to eat. You must be starved. Now that the worst of the dressing was over and the numbweed had drained the pain in her feet, Melanie was definitely aware of the emptiness in her stomach. So, I'll be right back. Melanie, if you need anything after that, just shout for Sandra. She'll be on the floor, minding the little ones, and she knows she's to listen for you. As Melanie worked her way through the generous meal Miriam brought, she reflected on some harsh truths. Definitely Mavi had given her the distinct impression that she'd never be able to use her hand again. Yet Mavi was too skilled a healer not to have known that the knife had missed the finger tendons. She had deliberately let the hand heal with drawn flesh. It was painfully clear to Melanie that Mavi, as well as Yarnis, had not wanted her to be able to play again. Grimly, Melanie vowed that she'd never return to Half Circle. Her reflections made her doubt Manora's assurance that she could stay at Brendan Ware. No matter, she could run away again. Run she could, and live holdless. And that's what she'd do. Why, she'd run across all Pern. And why not? Melanie became pleased with the notion. Indeed, there was nothing to stop her running right to the Master Harper Hall in Fort Holt. Maybe Petteron had sent her songs to Master Harper Robinson. Maybe they were more than just twiddles. Maybe. But there was no maybe about returning to the half-circle hold. That she would not do. The issue did not arise over the next few days while her feet itched. Miriam said that was a good sign of healing. and she found herself beginning to fret with impatience at her disability. She also worried about her fire lizards now that she wasn't able to forage for them. But the first evening when Beauty reappeared, her little eyes darting about the chamber to be sure that Melanie was alone, there was nothing hungry in her manner. She daintily accepted the morsels that Melanie had carefully saved from her supper. Rocky and Diver appeared just as she was drifting off to sleep. However, they promptly curled themselves up into sleep against the small of her back, which they wouldn't have done if they'd been hungry. They were gone the next morning, but Beauty lingered, stroking her head against Melanie's cheek until she heard footsteps in the corridor. Melanie shooed her away, telling her to stay with the others. "I know it's boring to stay abed," Miriam agreed the third morning with a weary sigh that told Melanie Miriam would gladly have swapped places. "But it's kept you out of Les's way since well," and Miriam censored what she was about to say. "With Ramoth brooding over those eggs, we're all treading hot sands until they hatch, so it's better you're here." "There must be something I can do now that I'm better. I'm good with my hands." And then Melanie, too, halted uncertainly. "You could help Shanra with the little ones if you could. Can you tell any stories?" "Yes, and Melanie all but blurted out what she had done at the Sea-Hold. "Can at least keep them amused." Where-bred children were not like cold children, Melanie discovered. They were more active physically, poised of insatiable curiosity for every detail she cared to tell them about fishing and sailing. It was only when she taught them to fashion tiny boats of sticks and wide-root leaves and sent them off to sail the skiffs in the Ware Lake that she had any rest the first morning. Sorry about that quick stop. I had a phone call. In the afternoon, she amused the younger ones by recounting how Tigran had rescued her. Thread was not as automatically horrifying to Ware children as it would be to Holders, and they were far more interested in her running and rescue than in what she was running from. Unconsciously, she fell into a rhyming pattern and caught herself up sharply just before she conceived a tune. The children didn't seem to notice, fortunately, and then it was time to peel tubers for the evening meal. It was difficult to subdue that little tune as she worked. Really, it had exactly the cadence of her running stride. "Oh, did you cut yourself?" asked Senra from the other side of the table. "No," replied Melanie, and she grinned with a good humor. She had just realized something very important. She wasn't in the Sea-Hold any longer, and no one here knew about her harping. Likewise, no one would know if it were her own songs she hummed when she felt like humming. So she began to hum her running song, and was doubly pleased with herself because the tune matched her pairing strikes too. "It's a relief to hear someone happy," remarked Senra, smiling encouragingly at Melanie. Melanie realized that she had been vaguely aware all day of the fact that the atmosphere in the living caverns reminded her of those times when the fishing fleet was overdue in a storm and everyone was waiting. Miriam was very worried about Bracky, but she wouldn't say why, and Melanie was reluctant to broach the girl's sad reserve. "I'm happy because my feet are healing," she told Senra, and hurried on. "But I wish someone would tell me what's wrong with Bracky. I know Miriam is worried sick about her." Senra stared at Melanie for a moment. "You mean you haven't heard about—" She lowered her voice and glanced about to make sure they weren't overheard. "About the queens?" "No. No one tells girls anything in the sea hold." Senra looked surprised, but accepted the explanation. "Well, Bracky used to be at Southern. You did know that." "Good. And when Valor banished all the rebellious old-timers to Southern, the Southerners had to go somewhere. Thabor became were-leader at Fort Hold. Kalara," and Senra's usually gentle voice became hard. "Kalara was werewoman for Prydath, with Bracky and Werneth." Senra was having trouble telling the tale, so Melanie was very glad she hadn't asked Miriam. "Werneth rose to mate, but Kylara," and the name was spoken with intense hatred, "Kylara hadn't taken Prydath far enough away. She was close to mating too, and when Werneth flew the bronzes, she rose and—" There were tears in Senra's eyes, and she shook her head, unable to continue. "Both queens died?" Senra nodded. "Bracky's alive, though, isn't she? Kyler lost her mind, and we're desperately afraid that Bracky will lose hers." Senra mopped the tears from her face, sniffling back her sorrow. "Poor Miriam. She's been so good to me." Senra sniffed again, this time from pique. "Miriam likes to think that she's got the cares of the were on her shoulders." "Well, I've a lot of respect for her and the way she keeps on going when she's worried sick than if she crept off someplace and just felt sorry for herself." Senra stared at Melanie. "No need to bristle at me, girl, and if you keep on stabbing your knife that way, you will cut yourself." "Will Bracky be all right?" asked Melanie after a few minutes of strict attention to her peeling. "We hope so." But Senra didn't sound confident. "No, we do. You see, Rameth's clutch is about to hatch, and Lessa is certain that Bracky could impress the queen. You see, she can speak to any of the dragons, the way Lessa can. And Grawl and Braid are always with her. Here comes Miriam. Melanie had to admit that Miriam, who only numbered the same turns as she did assume an officious manner. She could understand that an older woman like Sanra might not take kindly to it. Yet Melanie had no fault to find with Miriam's ministrations, and she let the girl bustle her off to her cubicle to change her bandages. "You've been on them all day, and I want to be sure no dirt's in your scabs," she said briskly. Melanie obediently lay on her stomach in the bed, then tentatively suggested that perhaps tomorrow she could change her own bandages and save Miriam some work. "Don't be silly. Feet are very awkward. But you're not. You should just hear Curtel complain. He got thread scored during the last fall. You'd think that he was the only one ever in the world scored. And besides, Manara said I was to take care of you. You're easy. You don't moan, groan, complain, and swear like Catral. Now, these are healing nicely, in spite of the way it might feel to you. Manora says that the feet hurt worse than any part of your body but hands. That's why it seems worse to you, I expect." Meneley had no argument and breathed a sigh of relief that this painful session was over. "You taught the Werelings how to make those little boats, didn't you?" Meneley flipped over, startled and wondering if she'd done wrong. But Miriam was grinning. "You should have seen the dragons snorting them about the lake," Miriam giggled. "Having the grandest time. I haven't laughed so much in weeks. There you are." And Miriam bustled away on some other errand. The following day, Miriam hovering beside her, Melanie walked slowly and not too painfully through the living cavern and into the main kitchen cavern for the first time. "Ramus' eggs are just about to hatch," Miriam told her as she placed Melanie at one of the work tables along the back side of the huge cave. "There's nothing wrong with your hands, and we'll need all the help we can get for the feast. And maybe your Bracky will be better." "Oh, she's got to be, Melanie. She's got to be." Miriam scrubbed her hands together anxiously. "If she isn't, I don't know what will become of her and Fëanor. He cares so much. Manora's as worried about him as she is about Bracky." "It'll all come right, Miriam. I'm sure it will," Melanie said, putting all the confidence she could muster into her voice. "Oh, do you really think so?" Miriam dropped her poise and bustled efficiently and was briefly a young, bewildered girl in need of reassurance. "I most certainly do." And Melanie was angry with Sanora's unkind assessments of the day before. "Why, when I thought I'd be scored to death, Tigran appeared, and when I thought they'd all be threaded, Melanie hastily shut her mouth, frantically trying to think of something to fill that gap. She'd almost told Miriam about saving the fire lizards. They must belong to somebody, a man said in a loud, frustrated tone of voice. Two dragon riders entered the kitchen cavern, slapping dusty gloves against sandy boots and loosening their riding belts. They could be attracted to the ones we have to Gowan, considering how badly we need the creatures. In the egg, it's a rankin' nuisance to have the whole flamin' fair that no one will claim. The next thing Melanie knew, Beauty appeared over her head, giving a terrified squawk, and landed on Melanie's thinly clad shoulder. Beauty wrapped her tail choking tight about Melanie's neck and buried her face into her hair. Rocky and Diver seized the cloth of her skirt in their claws, struggling to burrow into her arms. The air was full of frightened fire lizards diving at her, and Miriam, who made no attempt to defend herself, stared with utter amazement at Melanie. "Miriam, did they belong to you after all?" cried Tegelen as he strode towards her table. "No, they're not mine." Miriam pointed to Melanie. "They're hers." Melanie was speechless, but she managed to contain Rocky and Diver. The others took refuge on the ledges above her, broadcasting fear and uncertainty. She was just as confused as the fire lizards, because why were they in the where? And the where seemed to know about fire lizards, and "We'll soon know whose they are," said a woman's angry voice, carrying clearly in the pause. A small, slim woman in riding gear came striding purposefully into the main section of the kitchen cavern. "I asked Ramuth to speak to them." She was followed by another rider. "Over here, Lessa," Tigran said, beckoning, but his gaze did not leave Melanie's. At the sound of that name, she struggled out of the chair, with the fire lizards squawking and trying to retain their balance and hold on her. All Melanie could think of was to keep out of Lessa's way, but she got tangled up in the chairs about the table and painfully stubbed her toes. Miriam grabbed her arm, trying to make her sit down, and there seemed to be more fire lizards than Melanie could claim circling over her head, chittering wildly. "Will someone quiet this lot?" demanded the small, dark woman, confronting Melanie, her fists on her riding belts, her eyes snapping with anger. "Ramuth, if you would." Abruptly, complete silence reigned in the huge kitchen cavern. Melanie felt Beauty trembling more violently than ever against her neck, and the talons of the two bronzes dug into her arms and sides. "That's better," said Lessa, her eyes brilliant. "And who are you? Are all these yours?" "My name's Melanie, please, and—" Melanie glanced up nervously at all the fire lizards perched silently with whirling eyes on ledges and hanging from the ceiling. "Not all of these are mine." "Melanie," some of Les's anger abated in her perplexity. Melanie? She was trying to place the name. Menor had told you about her, Lessa, said Miriam, which Melanie thought was greatly daring and very much appreciated. The Gran rescued her from the threadfall. She'd run her feet raw. Ah, yes. So you, Melanie, how many fire lizards do look to you? Melanie was trying to figure out whether Lessa was annoyed or pleased. And if she had too many fire lizards, would she be sent back to Half Circle? She felt Miriam prod her in the ribs. These? Melanie indicated the 3 clinging to her, and felt Miriam dig her again. And only 6 of those up there. Only 6 of those up there? Melanie saw Les's fingers drumming on her wide riding belt. She heard one of the dragon riders muffling a sound, and glancing up, she saw that his hand was over his mouth, but his eyes were dancing with laughter. When she dared to look at Les's face, she saw the slight smile on the werewoman's face. That makes 9, I think, Lessa said. Just how did you contrive to impress 9 fire lizards, Melanie? I didn't contrive. I was in the cave when they hatched, and they were hungry, you see. I'd a sack full of spider claws, so I fed them. Cave? Where? Lessa's words were crisp, but not unkind. On the coast, above Nerat, by the Dragonstones. Dagellin uttered an exclamation. You were living in that cave? I found jars and pots. No sign of fire lizard shells. I didn't think fire lizards clutched in caves, Lessa remarked. It was only because the tide was high and the clutch would have been washed away. I helped the queen put them in the cave. Lessa regarded Melanie steadily for a long moment. You helped the fire lizard? Yes, you see, I'd fallen over the cliff, and the queen and her bronzes from the old clutch, not these here. Melanie jerked her chin at Beauty, Rocky, and Diver. They wouldn't let me get off the beach until I helped them. Dagellin was staring at her, but the other 2 riders were grinning broadly. Then Melanie saw that Miriam, too, was smiling with delight. More unbelievable to Melanie in her confusion was the fact that a little brown fire lizard was perched on Miriam's shoulder, intently staring at Beauty, who wouldn't take her head out of Melanie's hair. I'd like to hear that whole story in sequence one day, Lessa said. Right now, will you please keep your lot under control, and with you? They're upsetting Ramoth and the others. 9, oh? And Lessa sighed, turning away. When I think of where I could use 9 eggs to good purpose. Please? Do you need more fire lizard eggs? Lessa whirled so fast that Melanie took an involuntary backward step. Of course we need fire lizard eggs. Where have you been that you don't know? She turned on to Gellin. Your wing leader, didn't you inform all the Seaholds? Yes, I did, Lessa, said Dagellin, looking straight at Melanie. Now, just about the time Melanie first disappeared from her hold. Right, Melanie? The sweepriders have been on the lookout for her ever since. But she was holed up snug as you please in that cave with 9 fire lizards. Melanie hung her head in despair. Please, werewoman, don't send me back to half-circle hold. A girl who can impress 9 fire lizards? Said Lessa in a sharp, rippling tone that made Melanie look up. Does not belong in a sea hold. Degellen, find out from Melanie where that clutch is and secure it for us immediately. Let us fervently hope it hasn't hatched. To Melanie's intense relief, Lessa actually smiled at her, obviously in a much improved temper. Remember to keep those pesky creatures away from Ramoth. Miriam can help you train them. Hers are quite useful now. She swept away, leaving the entire cavern breathless. Activity suddenly picked up on all sides of the kitchen. Melanie felt Miriam pressing her into a chair. She sank weakly down. She found a cup of claw in her hands and heard Degellen urging her to take a few sips. One's first encounter with Lessa is apt to be unnerving. She's so small, Melanie said dazedly. Size is irrelevant. Melanie turned anxiously to Miriam. Did she really mean it? I can stay, Miriam? If you can impress 9 fire lizards, you really belong here. But why didn't you tell me about them? Didn't you see mine? I've only the 3. Degellen clicked his tongue at Miriam, who stuck hers out at him. I told mine to stay in the cave. And here we've been racking our brains, Miriam went on, accusing riders of hoarding eggs. I didn't know you people needed fire lizards. Miriam, stop teasing her. She's unnerved. Melanie, drink your claw and relax, Degellen told her. Melanie obediently sipped her claw, but she felt obliged to explain about the boys in her sea hold, who could think of nothing but snaring fire lizards. And she felt so strongly that was wrong that she hadn't even mentioned seeing them mating. Under the circumstances, you did just as you should, Melanie, said Degellen. But let's get to that clutch and rescue it. Where did you see it? How close do you think it is to hatching? The eggs were still pretty soft when I found them the day Gran rescued me, and it's about a half morning's walk from the Dragonstones. A few minutes glide by Dragonback, but south, north, where? Well, south, where stream feeds into the sea. Degellen raised his eyes in expiration. That describes too many places. You better come with me. Degellen, Miriam sounded shocked. Melanie's feet are in shreds. So is Lessa's temper. We'll wrap her feet in hides, but we must get those eggs. And you're not head woman yet, my girl. Tigellin said, waggling his finger at Miriam. It didn't take long to outfit Melanie. Miriam, as if to make up for her officiousness, brought her own warehide riding jacket and headgear and a pair of vastly oversized boots. They were eased over Melanie's sore and bandaged feet and fastened tightly around her legs with leather straps. Rocky and Diver were reassured by tidbits of meat, but Beauty refused to unwrap her tail from Melanie's neck. She chattered angrily at Tigellin when he half carried Melanie to Monarch, waiting patiently just outside the kitchen cavern. So I am going to take a very quick water break since I actually only have 4 more pages left. This is moving along a lot faster than I thought. I just need a sip of water. Give me a moment. Much better. And boy, I didn't realize how dark it had gotten in here since the sun's gone down. So not only have the ring light on, but the other one on too. So now I can see a little bit better. All right. Tigellin threw Melanie up the dragon's shoulder. She hauled herself up to his neck ridges by the fighting straps, giving her feet 1 or 2 painful knocks. Tigellin started to settle himself in front of Melanie, but Beauty came alive, hissing maniacally and lashing out at the dragon rider with one foreleg, talons unsheathed. "She's never been so bad-mannered," Melanie said apologetically. "Monarch, will you speak to her?" asked Tigellin good-naturedly. The next instant, Beauty stopped mid-hiss, chirped experimentally, her eyes whirling less frantically, and her tail relaxed from its chokehold on Melanie's throat. "That's a sight better. She does have a baleful stare." "Oh, dear." "I'm teasing you, Melanie. Now look, I shall have Monarch tell your fair fire lizards exactly what we're going to do, so they don't get mad when we take off." "Oh, would you?" "I would. And Tigellin paused. "I have. We're away." This time Melanie could enjoy the sensations of flying. She couldn't imagine why Petron had found the experience so horrible. She didn't even fear the lack of all sensation as they went between. She did feel the bitter, bitter cold in the soles of her half-healed feet, but the pain lasted such a fleeting second. Abruptly, they were low over the Dragonstones, coming in from the sea. The sheer thrill of the flight took Melanie's breath away. "There's a chance that the First Queen might lay another clutch in that cave," Tigellin said over his shoulder. "But it should be cleared of your things." So they landed on the beach with Monarch peering rather disapprovingly at the little cove while the water lapped gently on his feet. Her group arrived, caroling in wild delight at coming home. A single fire lizard appeared above and to one side of them. "Look, Tigellin, that's the old queen." But she was gone when Tigellin looked up. "I'm sort of sorry she saw us here. I was hoping." "Where was the clutch when you rescued it?" "We're standing on the place." Monarch moved to one side. "Does he hear what I'm telling you?" Melanie whispered anxiously into Gellen's ears. "Yes. So be careful how you speak of him. He's very sensitive." "I haven't said anything, have I, that would hurt his feelings?" "Melanie," Gellin looked at her, grinning. "I was teasing you." "Oh." Yes. Well, so you've managed to climb that cliff face." "It wasn't so hard. If you look, you'll see there's plenty of hand and footholds, even before I made a regular path." "A regular path?" Yes. Monarch, you can get us a bit can you get us a bit closer, please?" Monarch obligingly angled against the cliff face and raised himself to his haunches. Melanie was amazed to see that they could step off his shoulders right into the cave. Her 9 came arrowing into the opening, trumpeting and squealing, their bugles abruptly amplified by the vaulting height of the inner cavern. Just as she and Tegelen reached it, the light was suddenly blocked. Turning, she saw Monarch's head in the opening, his great eyes whirling idly. "Monarch, get your great bloody head out of the light, will you?" said Tegelen. Monarch blinked, gave a wistful rumble, but removed his great head. "Why didn't anyone find you on search, young lady?" Tegelen asked, and she saw that he'd been watching her intently. "No one's ever been searched at Half Circle Seahold." "That shouldn't surprise me. Now where did that old queen have her clutch?" "Right where you're standing." Tegelen jumped sideways, giving her a second admonitory look which she couldn't interpret. He knelt, running his fingers through the sand, making pleased noises in his throat. "You tossed out the old shells?" "Yes. Was that wrong?" "I don't think so." "Would she come back here again?" "She might, if the cove waters remain high the next time she mates. Do you remember when you saw her mating flight?" "Yes, I do, because we had threadfall just after, the one where the leading edge hit the marshes halfway to Nerat." "Good girl!" Tegelen tipped his head back, pressing his lips together, and Melanie thought he was doing some rapid mental calculations. Elmi had a similar habit when he was charting a course. "Yes. And when did these hatch?" "I lost track of my 7 days, but they hatched 5 falls ago." "That's great. She may mate before high summer, if the fire lizards follow the same sort of cycle the dragons do during a pass." He glanced around him at the bits and pieces with which she had made the cave livable. "Do you want any of these things?" "Not many," Melanie said, and she dove for her sleeping rug. Her pipes were still there, so he hadn't seen them in his first visit to the cave. She bundled the rug around the pipes again. "My oil," she said, grabbing up the pot. "I'll need that." "Not really," said Tegelen with a grin. "But bring it along. Manor always interested in such things." She took her dried herbs, too, and made a neat package which she could tie on her back. Ruthlessly, she then began to chuck her homemade crockery out the cave entrance. "Oh!" Aghast, she rushed to the mouth, looking about for Monolith. You missed him. He's got more sense than to stay around when there's cleaning. And with that, Tagellin launched her boiling pot into the air. That's everything, I think. Let's go. At the entrance, Melanie turned for one last look at the cave and smiled to herself. She'd never thought to leave it, certainly not to step to the shoulders of a dragon. But then she never thought she'd live in a cave like this at all, much less ride a dragon. Nothing now marked that anyone had ever sheltered in this cave. Even the dry sand was falling back into the depression their feet had made. Tagellin held out his hand to help her to Monolith's back, and then they were away to find the fire lizard's clutch. And that was the end of chapter 10. I'm pleasantly surprised that I got through that in one go. I didn't really want to cut it up into two. And it didn't take as long as I thought to read. I think I've had to cut it up into 3 different recordings on my phone. Number 1, because I got a phone call and it stopped the recording. Number 2, because I really needed that drink. And, well, this one. I'm so happy that she has been accepted into the hold. The Werehold. Instead, and they're never going to make her go back to Half Circle. Even though she's already made that a promise to herself that even if she has to go, she will leave immediately. No surprise there. And to find out that her mother purposely let her hand heal wrong so she couldn't play. Oof. Heal or do no harm. Yeah. Well, I mean, people are evil. People are stupid. I know they were just trying to keep with the traditions that they have, and a mere girl didn't mean that much. But honestly, Melanie is a character that means a lot. I really like her character. At 14, this girl has got a lot more strength in her body, in her mind, than a lot of people would. And with as many times as I've read these books over the years, I don't think I ever really realized just how young Melanie was. My brain sort of put 17, 18, 19. So to know that she's just in her beginning teen years, I mean, yeah, the way their culture is, that is older than 13, 14 today. But it's just nice to see, I guess. Yeah. I know my husband won't be home for at least another hour, probably 2. And chapter 11 doesn't look like it's that long. It's 49 to 56, so 8 pages. I think I'm going to give chapter 11 a read too. That way we're ahead again. And then I will only have 2 chapters left after that, chapter 12 and chapter 13. But I've got another book to start right after. So this will keep us going for a bit. I'll probably record the last two chapters on Tuesday or Wednesday. That way we are completely caught up. And then we're going to go to Dragonsong, which follows Menelie's tale. The next book is also about Melanie and about her new friends and her fire lizards. We haven't even gotten to some of those characters yet. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please give a like, a comment if you want. And honestly, if you want to subscribe, that'd be fantastic too. But hey, just if you've been here with me through this entire book so far, thank you very much. Have a great one.